you to get comfortable in your chairs, wherever you're at, to kind of still your body, get ready to kind of still your mind, allow yourself to pull your thoughts away from what you have to do, away from your to-do list, away from the past or the future, and to focus on your breath, to use that mental awareness that you have, that Christ consciousness, to focus on the breath, to feel connected with that divine presence that lives and moves and has its being in you. Thomas Merton says that the whole idea of compassion is based on a keen awareness of the interdependence of all these living beings, which are part of one another and all involved in one another. I invite you to ask yourself, who have I come here to be? Who have I come here to be? One way to answer this question is to say, I have come here to be compassionate. I have come here to be loving. I have come here to share my light and my kindness, my joy, my hope, my love with the world. We all know we're supposed to be compassionate, but do we really understand what it takes? Some would say it's about embracing selflessness. Yet compassion is like the key that opens the door to our best self. Compassion lifts us above ourselves into a more expanded view. To be truly compassionate, we risk feeling another's pain. We risk feeling our pain. We risk being called to act. We risk being ejected from the familiar and the comfortable, which allows us to grow. There is no higher calling than this, to care so deeply for one another and for ourselves that we are made more aware of our wholeness. Who have you come here to be? Only you can answer this for yourself. Who have you come here to be? So I invite you to contemplate this for a few moments in the stillness, in the safe presence of this divine essence that lives and moves and has its being in you. This feeling of oneness, this feeling of connection, this feeling of love. Who have you come here to be? as we rest in this presence? Can we feel our own connection to all that is? That we too are worthy of the compassion that we give. That we too are whole and complete. We too are enough. Who have you come here to be? I have come here to be a unique expression of the divine. I have come here to be whole. I have come here to love myself and others. I am enough. I am enough. Know that you can return to this presence, to this feeling of connection, this feeling of being worthy, of being enough at any moment in time. Simply by going within, by focusing on the breath, by affirming your spiritual truth, you can come back to this place. Who have I come here to be? I have come here to be compassionate. No walls, real or imagined, can block the flow of compassion through me. I open myself at depth. I allow myself to grow, to express more of my wholeness by living compassion in all I say and do. So I invite you to gently bring your awareness back to your body temple with love, gentleness, and compassion. Maybe you bring your awareness to just the feeling of your fingers and your toes. You start to wiggle them. Maybe you gently start to roll your wrist or roll your ankles. Just bring a gentle awareness back to your body. Maybe you roll your shoulders back or roll them forward, paying attention ever so gently to what your body is saying to you. And when you're ready, I invite you to open your eyes. How was that this morning? A little dive into the inner journey of self-compassion and compassion for others. So, blessings and welcome to Unity Spiritual Center of Panama City. I want to thank each and every one of you for showing up as you and for you. You are the powerful catalyst behind your own personal transformation. It's the love and compassion that you have within you and that you have for this community that lights your way. So I'm going to invite you to take another little journey with me into some inner reflection. So I'm going to invite you once again to take a few moments to close your eyes as we consider this idea of compassion. So I'm going to invite you just to bring your awareness to a safe space for you. Maybe you imagine yourself sitting in a garden on a bench. Maybe you imagine yourself down at the beach. Maybe you imagine yourself back at home in your favorite chair. Whatever that place is for you. Some place that feels safe and secure where you can allow your curiosity to wander. Where you can begin to explore yourself. And so I want to ask you, what does the word compassion mean to you? how would you define it for yourself? And I want to give you a few moments to contemplate that. What kinds of actions do you think of? What do you visualize when you hear the word compassion? Maybe you imagine a time that you were compassionate with others. Maybe you imagine a time that others were compassionate with you. Maybe you can imagine sitting with a friend or a loved one in the hospital by their bedside so that they're not alone. Maybe you imagine going to visit people in the nursing home, offering them kindness and listening to their stories. Maybe you think about sitting with someone who are in the last moments here in their physical body on this earth and holding them with love and light as they transition from this realm to the next. Maybe you picture yourself offering a helping hand to a stranger or a neighbor or a friend or a loved one. Maybe you see yourself providing a meal for someone who is housing insecure, or offering them a few dollars to get by for another day. Maybe you're envisioning in this journey, in this exercise, holding space for a loved one so that they feel listened to, so that they feel understood. Maybe you see yourself offering forgiveness when someone asks to be forgiven because they didn't show up from their higher selves on that particular day. And so they need compassion from you as much as they need compassion from themselves. So as we conclude this little journey within, I want you to just take note in your mind of what came to you as you envision compassion. What are the words, what are the visuals that came to you during this exercise? Now, I'm going to invite you to open your eyes again and return your awareness to this space. So I'm going to ask, and this is a reflective question, not one that I expect you to answer out loud, but how many of you in your visualizations saw yourself giving compassion to yourself? Did anyone? How many of you saw yourself holding yourself with love? Giving that same kind of kindness that we would want to give to a stranger or to a friend or to a loved one? Not many, right? So I think it's important as you go along this spiritual journey, this journey into self-awareness, that you recognize how you are defining compassion. Now, why is that? Because before you can begin to transform your definition of compassion, how you live with compassion, you have to recognize what limits you're putting on yourself from your viewpoint of compassion, your current viewpoint. What are your beliefs about compassion today? So compassion is often defined in relation to another, to somebody else's suffering. So if you go to someplace like the Merriam-Webster dictionary, you're going to get the following definition of compassion: the sympathetic consciousness of others' distress with a desire to alleviate it. So here's a conscious awareness, a sympathetic consciousness, an awareness of others' distress with a hope, with a want to alleviate it. Now, this can be a very worthy and noble pursuit. I certainly invite all of you to have compassion for others. In many religions, including Buddhism, compassion is considered one of the most noble parts of the path. It overlays with the different perfections. In fact, Buddhism has a whole realm of beings that have forgone their own final enlightenment to stay around and help others achieve enlightenment. So Chris, can you move that slide? They're called bodhisattvas. This is a picture of the Bodhisattva Guanyin that I took at the San Diego Museum of Art just a couple weeks ago. How relaxed are they in their knowingness, in their givingness? It's not a struggle. And so as I sat in this room, I started pondering some of the questions that I kind of guided you through in that exercise. How do I see compassion? Does compassion for others, is that the only type of compassion there is? And if I give others compassion, does that mean I have to give up compassion for myself? If we're all interconnected, am I not worthy of the same compassion I want to give to others? So I know I've experienced compassion in my lifetime. How many of you would say that you've experienced compassion from others in your lifetime? How many of you can say that you have given yourself self-compassion? I don't see nearly as many hands. But I've witnessed both in my lifetime. So I've known compassion when I experience it from others, when I've gone through difficult times, including as a member of this community, when people have reached out, listened to me, helped me, saw that there was a need, and offered to assist in some way, so that I wasn't struggling alone, so I wasn't struggling by myself in the midst of my suffering. I see compassion when it's given by others. I've seen compassion in the midst of our own community, whether it be holding the door open for somebody else, allowing somebody in for into traffic, or even in the aftermath of Hurricane Michael. That's probably the biggest awareness I have of compassion as a community. How many people came from throughout the country to assist strangers, to make sure that they had water and food, and even a place to lay their head at night as they recovered from the storm? But I've also known compassion as I've given it to others. One example of this is what I do as a prayer chaplain. So I was trained, and I teach other prayer chaplains, to listen with compassion, to listen with an open heart. Not so that we can fix the other person. The other person isn't broken. It's so that we can affirm, so that we can uplift, so that we can remind them that they can be inspired and empowered for their own personal transformation. They have the tools they need at any given time to rise up to the occasion. I know many of you I've given compassion to in this community. Rather, it's showing up, sitting down to listen, offering a helping hand. So I've known compassion. I've also known compassion for myself, especially over the last 2.5 years or so since I saw an autism diagnosis. More compassion than I ever had for myself before. Why? Because I recognize that I'm not broken. I'm whole. And this little voice inside me that tells me I'm broken is wrong. So in speaking about compassion, I want you to become aware of how you might be limiting your view of compassion by just saying it's about how I show up for others. How does that definition of compassion help you cultivate compassion and love for yourself? Is your idea of compassion only about helping others? I know for a while that was likely my definition. For a while I ignored myself. I ignored what I needed to give to myself. But I think certainly most of us recognize that we do give something to ourselves. We recognize that we do really hold compassion for ourselves, but maybe we don't call it compassion. Maybe we call it self-love or self-care or other ways where we show up for ourselves. So I want to invite you to consider expanding your definition of compassion. So I want to challenge you. What does that look like if you expand your definition of compassion to include yourself? Maybe you want to write your definition of compassion at home or here today and shift how you think about compassion. I took just a few moments to take that earlier dictionary definition and I transformed it to this: a loving kindness consciousness, aware of suffering and holding a desire to alleviate it. A loving kindness consciousness, something that's born out of our divine presence. That divine presence lives and moves and has its being in us. That's the loving kindness consciousness. That is aware of suffering, not just in others, but also in ourselves, and that wants to do something about it, wants to hold the hope that it can be better, that it's not always about suffering. So in looking and researching this topic, I know I've talked a little bit about Dr. Kristen Neff before, and I think Reverend Ron has as well. She is an associate professor of educational psychology at the University of Texas and a preeminent researcher on self-compassion. She has a website called selfcompassion.org. And she defines self-compassion as needing the following 3 qualities: self-kindness over self-judgment, a sense of common humanity over a sense of isolation, and mindfulness over identification. So what does that mean? It means that coming from a place of love rather than a place of harsh judgment, right? It means feeling our oneness, our interconnection, versus feeling ourselves being isolated and alone. And it means that we are looking at this with an awareness that tends to be objective as we can be, what our situation is, versus over-identifying with the bad stuff, versus becoming the victim, versus saying, oh, woe is me, the world needs to change to make me feel better. I felt that before. I've said those things before. So now I want to ask you, how would you change your definition of compassion to include yourself? Maybe simply shifting your awareness, shifting your definition is enough to shift your perspective so that you can start envisioning yourself as a receiver of your own gift of compassion. Is this a gift you're willing to give yourself? Is it? Is it a gift you're willing to give yourself? Only you can answer that. I can't answer that for you. But here's the thing. If you said, yes, I want to give this gift to myself, you'll be pleased to know that self-compassion, the practice of it, has a lot of benefits. According to Dr. Neff, research indicates that self-compassion is strongly associated with psychological well-being. Higher levels of self-compassion are linked to increased feelings of happiness, optimism, curiosity, and connectedness. Some of these things I talked about last week. That sense of hopefulness, right? But higher levels of self-compassion are also linked to the following: decreased anxiety, decreased depression, decreased rumination, and a decreased fear of failure. How many of you want a decrease in those things? Okay. But she isn't the only researcher I referenced. Dr. James Ardati, a neurosurgeon and neuroscientist, says that cultivating self-compassion is the inner critic's kryptonite. So I'm not going to ask for a show of hands about how many of you have an inner critic. And if you think you don't have an inner critic, listen to your self-talk one day. Just listen to it. All that you can't, you never were, you're not enough, you're not worthy, oh, that ain't going to happen. You know that self-talk. And I'm not going to ask how many times your inner critic has put you down. If my inner critic is any correlation to yours, sometimes my head's not a nice place to be. Right? Now, I've lovingly given my inner critic a name, Gruffy. I've talked about Gruffy before. He's not nice. But having a name and having an awareness of this inner critic helps me. It helps me practice self-compassion. It helps me see where my ego and parts of me are saying, no, 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 when I really want to say yes, yes, yes. So by practicing self-compassion, we can hold space for our inner critic. We can sit down and listen to that inner critic to lovingly say, what is it you're trying to tell me? You can take Gruffy to tea. You can sit and listen, and when you do, you become aware of the negative and harmful beliefs that you hold about yourself. What are those for you? They're different for each one of us. And you can start to challenge those beliefs. Dr. Dottie says, self-compassion has the power to heal the parts of us that make us feel chronically unsafe and unloved and transform them into vital sources of wisdom and compassion that we can share with others. I don't know about you, but I want to transform that negative inner voice to something that I can use into wisdom about the truth of who I am and how I can serve others. So you might be asking, how does one practice self-compassion? I could give you the short answer that, like exercise, it's the one that you're going to do, right? What is that practice that you're comfortable with that allows you to show love to yourself? You can take a step forward in love, see yourself with love, listen to yourself with love. Each time that you recognize the love in you, the love as you, the love expressing as you, you take a step forward in self-compassion. But for those who are still like, I just don't know where to get started, I'm going to share with you 3 ways that I found helpful in my journey of discovering self-compassion, which I'm still working on. I'm not there yet, and I'm not done mastering this in any scope of the imagination. I'm just getting started. But the first way is to hold space for yourself in loving kindness when you don't live up to your own expectations. I'm a self-proclaimed recovering perfectionist, and I can tell you that perfectionism is a double-edged sword, because you never show up to how you think you should show up. So when you find your inner critic putting you down, offer yourself uplifting prayers. In Unity, we use affirmations, and most of all, encouragement. When that inner voice says you can't, say, I don't think so, I know I can. The second way is to explore our negative belief system with as little self-judgment as we can. I'm not saying eliminate all self-judgment, because that's the road that we're on. If we had already eliminated self-judgment, we wouldn't have the inner critic. But do it with as little self-judgment as you can. Do it with mindfulness and objectiveness that you can. So give yourself time, maybe each week or each month, to identify some of the negative beliefs that you hold about yourself. Maybe you journal about them. Maybe you go into meditation and you give Gruffy a space to talk. And you say, what is the basis of this? What is the fear that underlies this? What is the belief about myself that I hold that says I'm not worthy or I'm not enough? What is that? When you become aware of them, these negative beliefs, you can start to shift them. You can start to gently challenge those beliefs, and through time, you can change those beliefs about yourself. The third way is something that embraces both self-compassion and compassion with others. And that's an active loving kindness practice. For those who have never heard of metta or loving kindness prayers or meditation, this comes out of Buddhism. And so what happens in these is you start with yourself, using may I statements to affirm what you want more of or to affirm the wholeness that is in yourself. May I be well. May I be happy. May I be free of suffering is a common one. And once you've repeated that to yourself and you've gotten comfortable with that, you move on to sharing that compassion with others, with your loved ones, with acquaintances, with strangers, with people you disagree with, people maybe you even hold hatred for. We like to think that we don't hold hatred, but sometimes we do. May you be well. May you be happy. May you be free from suffering. Can you affirm that for other people and mean that with all of your beingness for them? Now, some of us are really good at expressing compassion for others. Not so great at expressing compassion for ourselves. I think our exercise today has proved that some of us struggle with this, myself included. And we struggle with this until we are what? Mentally exhausted, near burnout, or our bodies are screaming at us to slow down. And it's only then that we say, oh yeah, I got to pay attention to me a little. The great news is that compassion, even self-compassion, can be cultivated. You have the power to cultivate the compassion that you want to give. And I truly do believe that when we give ourselves the gift of compassion, we're able to give it so much more easily and so much more readily to others. So I want to leave you with this loving kindness prayer this morning. May you walk the path of awareness. May you walk the path of compassion and empathy. May you walk the path of love and radiate goodness in all that you say, think, and do. Namaste. All right. So I'm going to invite you to breathe into this awareness of compassion as we enter our time of giving consciousness. I want to thank you for showing up with this community, as you, for wanting to inspire and empower personal transformation for yourself, and wanting to be able to empower and inspire personal transformation for each other person who is here. So in whatever way you're giving to this community, be it time, talent, treasure, I want to say thank you. For those who wish to give to this community, you can do so today, here, during our offering time, or you can go to our donate page, or you can send a check to our P.O. box. And we bless each and every one of these contributions. So I invite you now to say our offering blessing with me. Divine love flowing through me blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. And so it is. And now our music team is going to bless us with another song.
In the stillness of this moment, there is peace, there is peace. In the stillness of this moment, there is peace, there is peace. And I rest and trust and breathe and know that in the stillness of this moment, there is peace. In the stillness of this moment, we are one, we are one. In the stillness of this moment, we are one, we are one. And we rest and trust and breathe and know that in the stillness of this moment, we are one.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Melissa, for your wonderful message, helping us to see that we can expand our definition of compassion and to include ourselves as well. Thank you so much. Let's give Melissa another hand. Thank you, Rose, and thank you, music team, and thank you all for being here today, and thank you to those that are watching on Facebook Live as well. Let's get ready to sing our peace song, and we do that by joining in a circle. peace on earth and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be with